This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top questions and things you struggle with most so you can have more energy and less decision fatigue about what to eat, how to move, and so you can change your thoughts to Flip 50 with the life and the energy you love in this second half. And today, I am launching May. Happy May Day, by the way, if you're listening to this during your commute or your ride home. And for those of you who missed your morning commute with me today on May Day, I so apologize. But I had something scheduled and I decided, nope, I just had a gut feeling that it's time to trigger something else and have a one-on-one conversation with you. So here we are. I want to talk about 5 different studies, and really each one of them expands on multiple other studies because it's never or should never be a one shot in the dark kind of a study done on a small group of subjects that I'm sharing with you, unless it's like earth shattering and shows a lot of hope for the future. But even then, what you and I need to be sure we're considering when we look at research is that the study has been in on subjects who are us, perimenopausal, menopausal, or postmenopausal women. And we also need to know or hope that there had been a large pool of women and or it's piggybacking off of other studies that have been done on large pools of subjects. Because, let's face it, a study of one, when you have a friend telling you what one thing worked for her, is not necessarily something you can say, oh, that applies to me, I should do that too, because you're so very different. But if a large pool of women all are doing something very similar or have done something very similar over a 30-year period, for instance, as is the case with a lot of Flipping 50 programming, then you can put a little bit more trust in it. And I hope, at the very least, I didn't put words in your mouth, but you are able to put a little hope and trust into the programs that I'm building. So what I'm doing today is sharing with you 5 studies. And I'm talking today all about really fat burning and fat loss. And I've been diving into, I have to be honest, this weekend, a lot of studies looking at muscle, looking at the fuel behind muscle and that longevity benefit. And I'm not just talking about living longer, but I'm talking about living better, longer, doing the things we want to do. And let's face it, looking the way we want to feel, because that's a big part of doing things, right? When we look good, we tend to want to be out in public, be more active, do more things. So there's nothing wrong with the motivation that you want to look good, because in my world, that means you're going to be more active and live healthier, make better choices every day, all day. So let's get through that. But as I've been looking at muscle and longevity and the protein requirement in both sides of, do you need more protein or don't you? And what really happens? I wrote a blog about it. I was pretty heated. I was pretty kind of on topic about this because the proof now for our future now tends to be swayed toward, yes, we do. We need protein, and leucine is one of the essential amino acids that's so prevalent. And I'm getting off on a little bit of a tangent, so I want to bring it back. But it brings me back to this. So in stumbling across all of the research I was digging into, what I've found is so many studies popped up that really addressed, again, how I've built the whole Fit You fat loss, weight loss program around it. And I want to share some of the exciting studies. So disclaimer right here, if you have 20 or more pounds to lose, this is especially targeting you. If you don't have quite that much to lose, it may be a little less likely to apply, but some of these things will also apply to you. There is a change when you reach a certain point of weight loss or you've held on to weight for a period of time, that the way you need to lose it changes. And so I'm really talking to you if you've had this stubborn weight problem for a little bit longer than just coming into perimenopause or menopause, or you've put it on and you just cannot take it off, and you've got 15 to 20 or more pounds to take off, then this is really you. So share it if it's not for you. There may be nuggets still that apply, but share it with somebody who you do know, who is looking for answers, but not a quick fix, not for the next diet or the first diet, but for the last one, for a way of living. That's who I want to be talking to. Okay, so we've got 5 studies here I'm going to share, and I'm telling you, in the middle, I am going to break, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Fit You program, because right now it's 50% off. This is May Day, and so that's my plea to you. May Day, May Day. Let's do something and love this summer. All right? So, number 1, I want to emphasize, I'm talking about in a couple of these first 2 studies, green tea extracts, or what we refer to as kind of phytochemicals that actually help fat burning. So looking at what is their effect on fat burning, and catechins, they're also called, in green tea, or sometimes we know it as mashta, and the powdered green tea leaves that are being so prevalently published about and talked about, and they're ingredients that are most commonly going into smoothies, but maybe a latte or simply a tea. And here's why you may want to look at that. So here's what happens with exercise. In this first study that I'm talking about, the Journal of Exercise, Nutrition, and Biochemistry found that fatty oxidation, which means really your fat burning power, your fat burning ability, goes up after the ingestion of phytochemicals prior to exercise, and yet energy expenditure did not change. So it's like they took subjects, divided them into 2 groups, and they looked at their energy expenditure after one group had taken the green tea extract, basically, and the other group had not. And the caloric burn was so similar. There was no statistical difference in the 2 groups. However, the fatty oxidation of the group that was taking or using the green tea extract was much greater, significantly greater. And so here's the takeaway from that, okay, you're not going to burn more calories, so what? But if more of the calories that you burned was from fat, then we're talking, okay, fat storage, go away. Fat storage on your arms, your thighs, your belly, evenly distributed. You don't get to pick, unfortunately, where it comes from. And know this, it comes from everywhere, evenly distributed. It's just the way nature intended it. And a lot of people will notice that the first place they want to lose it from is quite often the last place they actually get it lost from. You cannot dictate where you burn it from. And yet, this is a pretty powerful study kind of arguing for mashta or green tea. So right away, anybody who's thinking, doesn't that have caffeine in it? Yes, and actually most of the tests that are done using mashta or green tea use caffeinated, because they did not see the same result in the decaf, although they do think it's related to the mashta itself, not to simply caffeine, because they don't see the same test results in the caffeine alone. So important to think about, but if you're thinking, wait a minute, I get jittery, can't do caffeine, what you might notice is that the caffeine in mashta is quite different than, say, the caffeine in coffee. Or if you've ever done soda pop, I'm preaching to the choir. I'm hoping that you're not doing soda pop at all now. And so the difference is that it gives you the perfect calm and alertness combination. It's like, yes, sign me up for that, right? So who doesn't want a little bit more calm? We don't need that anxious kind of gotta go, the adrenaline kind of buzz. We actually want sustained energy and more focus, more alertness that doesn't always come with caffeine. In the case of mashta or green tea, it does. So what's the difference between mashta and green tea, in case you're not up to speed on that yet? The difference is mashta is concentrated. The powdered green tea leaves, having a serving of that is about the equivalent of having, say, 5 cups of green tea. So although even so, right, it carries a little bit more caffeine, it's still not going to have a jolt to you, not the way that, say, a cup of coffee would, although we're talking close to about the same as the amount of caffeine in a cup of coffee, and matcha are probably a lot closer than, say, in 1 cup of green tea in a steeped bag compared to coffee. So just so you have a little perspective on that. Okay, so great argument. I hope you're in agreement. I'm going to move on to study number 2. So another one in Nutrients, another journal, a little bit earlier on this one, significant increase. And this is what's really kind of curious. There was a significant increase in a couple of things that were looked at during this study, either post-exercise or no exercise. If they were using green tea extract, the fatty oxidation was greater, right? But in post-exercise, it was far greater, okay, than in post-exercise with no exercise, but with the green tea. So let me clarify that because I just kind of jumbled my words there. There was green tea extract was taken by people who were exercising and by those who were sedentary, no exercise that day. The post-exercise fat oxidation, meaning using fat, burning fat, was greater, although it was present in both. It was greater in those who exercise. And numbers I've shared before from another study when I first started talking about matcha, because I was so excited, was that it was about 30%. And you burn about 30% greater fat or more fat following interval training if you've had matcha before and it's in your bloodstream peaking at the time you exercise. So timing is important, and that timing is about 45 minutes to an hour, hour and a half before you exercise. If you can schedule that in, and not always going to work in the morning, right? But that would be ideal. Is it worth it if you can't do it like that? I would say yes. I would say take any sliver of that you can get. But in post-exercise, it was still elevated. Fat burning was elevated, but it was elevated at about 24% higher than normal at rest. Now, your post-exercise metabolism is already heightened. After intervals, it's much higher than normal exercise. So that 30% of increased fat burning after interval training is really big. But here's the other thing that the study did. They looked at post-exercise and non-exercise people taking the matcha, the green tea extract, versus a placebo. And neither group knew which they were getting. And true to form, the matcha performed or outperformed the placebo. Both the exercise and the non-exercise group increased their fat burning when they were using the matcha compared to the placebo. So plenty of proof there, again, that it's going to work for you. Okay, so I'm going to cover this third study, and then we'll come back to a little bit of an infomercial, if you will, talking about Fit You. So I want to talk about the effects of kind of looking at some interval training and what literally happens with interval training and why and where you might lose fat. So this comes from a diabetes and metabolism or metabolic syndrome obesity journal. So very specifically studying problematic cases, right? I mean, these are tough issues, but the effects on interval training that was done using bikes, talking about an 8-second sprint, 12-second recovery. And, this is like on a manual cycle ergometer. So kind of the old-fashioned, actually old school. It's what I originally did testing on in my undergraduate years. I don't even know that they have these in labs anymore, but the Monarch bicycle. So they did this for, sessions every week, 3 times a week for 12 weeks. And here's what happened with the interval training. significantly lower percent body fat, and here's the exciting part, it came from abdominals, came from the trunk fat, what they've separated, right, from the belly fat or abdominal fat, but trunk fat you can kind of think of as all over. So ladies, if you're talking back fat, bra fat, yeah, we're covering that right now. So interval training was very effective at doing that. And seriously, important that we cover one little detail, because usually I'm sharing studies that use subjects that were perimenopausal, menopausal. Otherwise, I'm telling you, this was done on younger women. So crucial to kind of take that into a factor because it changes things just a little bit. But what I want you to pay attention to is the work ratio to rest ratio and its effectiveness. Now, if something is good, a lot, of it is not better. These were young women, 3 times a week doing interval training at pretty high intensities may not work for us. And most of the literature points exactly to that. Just because a little is good does not mean more is better. And in fact, just means a little is good. So 1, maybe 2 interval training days a week, and the rest something quite different. In fact, low intensity exercise is how I reset everybody's hormones when they're doing the beginning of a program. They already show up exhausted, dark circles under their eyes, whatever it may be. But if that's you and you're flirting with adrenal fatigue, we gotta fill that hole up before we go anywhere else. So back to interval training. The ratio of work to recovery was 8 seconds to 12 seconds. Now that's not necessarily the same as one of my faves, which is 30 seconds work to 1 minute of recovery, but it clearly is stating that your work ratio or work time should be less than your recovery time, or better said, your recovery time should be greater than your work time, and we're not seeing that. We are seeing way too often Tabata intervals. And do they work? Yes, they do. But when originally they were developed and studied, they were studied with elite cyclists who were used to and actually were tested at levels working at 110% of their VO2 max. That is a place where most of us, you and I, would feel nauseous and sick and or literally lose our cookies, okay, to put it nicely. That's not where most of us prefer to exercise, or a place where many of us would return to exercise if we felt that way doing it. Now, I know some of you are out there and you're thinking, yes, I want to work that hard, but you're in the minority, and the rest of us really want to enjoy our exercise. And that's really the secret to repeating and getting good results. So be clear that your workout should be something consistently where your work interval is shorter than your recovery interval. And at least that should be true during the beginning and for a few months while you're adapting to high intensity work that really does the work. Okay, so super important that we're thinking about that. Okay, so I want to cover another study. And before I do that, one about weight training coming up and one about how we kick in your fat burning hormone and kind of put to sleep or stifle your fat storing hormone. So these studies, if they're interesting to you, these are a lot of what I've pulled for females over 50 in the Fit You program. It's all about not weight loss, because weight loss comes back to bite us in the, you know what, literally. And especially after the age of 50, if you're going for weight loss and you're doing it on a diet or you're doing it on a caloric restrictive diet, not paying attention to micronutrients, potentially to protein, you're starving your body of something, if not literally food, micronutrients, certainly, and we need them to function, and you can't sustain it. So if you do lose the weight, eating very little, what happens is your metabolism slows down. You have to eat even less, and you can't maintain good health. So if you've ever been in a position where you have been successful losing weight, but then you are miserable trying to maintain that weight loss, kind of trying to stuff yourself into those pants, trying to make sure that when you went out to eat, you had very little to eat and you had to say no to all the things that looked really good. If you've been in that place, you know that that's not even if it's sustainable, it's certainly not a happy place. And there's such a better way. The Fit You program is all about the better way of helping you lose fat by helping you eat more of the right foods, absolutely. But here are the kind of comments that we hear back from people who've done it, that they're eating more and still losing weight, that they're reintroducing carbohydrates that they stopped eating for way too long, and that's helping them lose weight, but also function better, be in a better mood, and just feel better all the way around. Those things are really important to me because that says lifestyle change. This is very possible. This is very maintainable. Something you can do for good forever. That's the whole purpose. The exercise portion of the Fit You program is there are a lot of intervals, but there are a lot of strength training exercises because we've got to be losing fat and gaining lean muscle at the same time. The scale may change very slowly, but the way your pants feel and your energy level and the way you sleep should change very quickly. And that's the exciting part. So the last leg of that three-legged stool for Fit You is mindset. We talk a lot about the diet mentality that's been drilled into our heads since our early 20s at the very latest, and maybe our teens at the very earliest, or maybe lower than that. If you watched your mom diet a lot, and many of us did, right? And the diets that they did didn't really work, and yet it's what we learned. So sometimes a dysfunctional habit learned when you're a child or an adolescent, we're still very impressionated or we're impressionable, and the messages we get from people whose lives we value and look up to matter, and they get ingrained. It's hard to switch that. So I spend a lot of time every week not just giving you here's what to do for exercise, here's what we're focusing on for nutrition, but here's the resistance I know you're going to have to these changes, and here's why. They're logical sources of resistance and what you can do about it when you have them. That's probably as big a change or a part of the material as anything else. So I want to make sure that you realize that if you're in, I'm in with you for the long haul, not just for the 8 weeks of the program or the 9 weeks if you include the mindset preparation that comes before the program, but I'm in it for the long haul. You're in a private Facebook group. We do coaching every week on the things that come up, and I know that it's like reading a book for the very first time. That's a really good book, but it's deep and there are a lot of layers to it. I've had books I've read and reread several times, and every time I do, I think, oh my gosh, I didn't even remember this little detail. When I think about the book, I forgot this part. And so it becomes the new layer. And I know the first time you're going through this, and accessing the information you get, and you'll keep access to forever, that you need to ask certain questions because it's just not quite all sinking in yet. And that's why I'm in there live, so that we can deal with those. Even if I'm answering very similar questions week to week as you go through it. And different people are in different places on the program, but we're all in it together. So that's the advertisement for the Fit You program. So if you're ready for a permanent change, consider it. All right. So I want to jump back into number 4 and number 5, the last two studies I want to share with you. Number 4 is all about weight training. We're talking about the difference between elevating your metabolism, and the ability to do that happens at a significantly greater level when you are doing a full body exercise program, strength training specifically, versus doing weight training every day with, say, a lower body part, an upper body part, arms one day, a shoulders another day. When you're a woman crunched for time, who really needs to move the entire body in an integrated way, focusing on body parts will not help you boost the metabolism in the way that making sure you have a big muscle leg exercise, a big chest pushing exercise, and a big back pulling exercise will do. Even if it is only those 3 exercises that you're choosing, that stimulating the entire body is much more valuable than spending, say, 10 minutes, the same amount of time, doing arms only. So flip your idea of doing, I do weights every day. I cringe when I hear that because I'm not understanding how that's possible. When you do the weights, it's really important that you do the weights, you do them effectively, you reach fatigue, and then in between that and the next time you do weights, you fully recover. So you might do some cardio to pump more blood and oxygen through to help the recovery process, but you should not be doing more muscle toning, muscle conditioning, strength training exercises between, because you're self-sabotaging. You need to move your body to fatigue when you strength training for it to be effective. So a little light exercise frequently with resistance training does not have the same impact on your metabolism. Super important when you're over 50, because not only do we have less time left on the planet, right? But we have a sense of urgency because we need injury prevention as much as we need anything else, even the metabolism. And that's crucial, but we need recovery for that to happen as well. And we tend to be having right now less time, period, right? I mean, we've got work, we've got family, we've got older parents potentially, we've got younger kids still dependent on us. We're caught between all of it and still trying to find a little me time. So really important that you make the most of the time that you do have. And the 5th study, this is one where we're talking about the hormone that turns on your fat burning and how it can be kind of dormant, a little sleepy, right, in our older adulthood stages. So we need to turn that back on. And one of the things that I've been very hesitant to talk a lot about without talking long about, and I'm going to refrain from doing that right now to keep this short, is fasting. So many of you know I've talked about fasting. I've talked about the fact that unless you have a really good foundation and you know exactly the foods that work well for you, you're doing that. You've tested foods that cause weight gain and or weight loss resistance, like dairy and gluten and wheat, and there are about 8 of them total that you need to take out of your diet, put back in one by one in a methodical, systematic way so you know what works. If you know what you're eating, you've already done that, then you have a good relationship with food, then you might be in a place to next try intermittent fasting. But if you're not in that place, you cannot jump off the bridge and expect to get back onto it if you try intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting with a poor diet or one that's poor for you will just land you right back in the same spot, starting to repeat the same pattern. So really important that you understand that first. And then you start at the end. So baby intermittent fasting steps before you go all the way to fasting for a day or for 2 days. Because yes, going without food for 2 days could very well increase cortisol in a woman who's already under a lot of stress and has elevated cortisol. That's the key. But ladies, between breakfast and lunch and dinner and breakfast the next day, that is not fasting. That is simply good nutrition. And it's a good sign that you've got adequate protein, fat, fiber, and the right carbohydrates at the right time in each of those meals. So if you don't, you can't make it. the question I would say is look back and what did you have for the meal before or the 2 meals before, because they tend to be setting you up for your energy and ability to stay sated or satisfied, not hungry, and have adequate energy to do the things you need and focus for your brain on the things you need to focus on. Those things are really important for you. So, what we do know is that fasting for periods of time, whether that be overnight and then extending that for a couple of more hours or 3 or 4 more hours the next day, that can have a positive impact on a hormone called glucagon. And that is responsible for fat burning. It's kind of the counter to insulin, which when you've got too much insulin in your body, insulin increases fat storage and halts fat burning. Double whammy, right? Not good things. And when we constantly eat, if you were somebody who once bought into that, eat 5 or 6 meals a day, you know that backfires, that it actually prevents you from burning fat, because why would your body ever need to burn fat if you're constantly giving it fuel? Reaching into fat stores is harder work for the body. It has to do a lot more work metabolically to go and use fat for fuel. So it's going to take the lazy way out. If you're giving it food, it's going to use that immediate energy source. And if you snack frequently, there is no reason ever to dip into fat storage. So I hope that makes sense. So occasionally doing some fasting, your body starts to burn fat at, about 3 or 4 hours after your last meal, more so than it ever will from simply exercise. So you could be raising your metabolism consistently if you simply could stop snacking. Now, some of you might be listening and feel like my blood sugar would be so low if I did that. I would feel badly. So the key is, long term, we need to solve that problem. We need to figure out why you're having those signs and symptoms, because that alone is not the problem. It's a sign of a problem. And that may be that your diet needs to change, the proportion of your macronutrients, the proportion of your fat, your protein, and your carbohydrate may need to change. The quality of those things may need to change. But short term, we don't want to keep you miserable, and we certainly don't want you to risk feeling sick or nauseous or not being able to focus into your job. But key that we're picking up clues even while we're solving the immediate problem, not letting you feel badly. So there is a huge percent increase in the amount of glucagon someone produces if they fast even for 24 hours. Now, I'm not encouraging you or suggesting that you fast for that long. That's just where the study relays the information. So can we, from that, extrapolate that potentially fasting for even 12 hours or making it to lunch the next day, which might be a fast of about 18, can we say that even would be helpful for somebody who's been eating way too frequently? I would say potentially yes. Has the chance to increase that. So you might experiment with that. And I wouldn't say try fasting overnight, no breakfast, and doing that tomorrow if you're used to eating breakfast when you get up. So what I would say is see how you feel waiting, another hour from your usual breakfast or another 2 hours. But here's the caveat. So some of you would say, I'd be great as long as I had my coffee, right? But if you have a lot of coffee and you're not eating, potentially you're elevating your cortisol level. So you've got to be careful with that. So 1 or 2 cups, cup down by 10, and then be thinking, how are you feeling? Are you jittery? Are you anxious? Can you focus? And if those things are good and you're starting to feel hungry, then you're probably okay. But pay attention to how you feel, because how you feel doesn't lie. And decreasing insulin, that can spike because you're either eating too frequently, or maybe you have a special condition. You have hyperinsulinemia, meaning your response to insulin is far greater. And then there is the risk of, if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic and you already have some insulin resistance. We want to be careful with what we're doing. So make sure that you're following and adhering to doctor's recommendations as well. But mini fasts can help increase your glucagon, which means increasing your fat burning potential. Okay, that's it. That's 5 of 5. 5 studies in 35 minutes. Not too bad. So again, I'm going to put the link below the show for the Fit You program right now. It's 50% off, and the reason is this. If you start in the middle of May or the beginning of May and you're jumping into Fit You by the 4th of July, how could you feel? And I won't promise you're going to lose up to X amount of pounds of weight, because it really depends on your relationship with food, your relationship with exercise, and your mindset, and the ability to follow the program and relay signs and symptoms so that we can customize the program so that it works for you. So I will promise you will most likely be sleeping better, have more energy. Your clothes will fit better, your proportions will be better, meaning not your portions on your plate, the proportions in your body. So while you may not lose the weight, if you're struggling to see waistline right now, you may find that so much better, or that you feel a little bit more bold and daring going sleeveless this summer. Those things will happen. And if your sleep is improving, your resilience to stress is improving, your energy level is improving, then you have the signs and the symptoms that progress is going to continue after the program. So I will tell you, you will have laid a foundation and have learned so much and unlearned so much about what is no longer true, and the science that we know so much better now about the optimistic ability to change, whether you're 50, you're 60, or you're older, is still true. If you've got a question about today, leave it below the show link at flipping50.com and join us on the Flipping 50 TV Facebook page to get all the juicy resources and the link to Fit You specifically that are mentioned in the show notes. Visit the show and this episode at flipping50.com/podcast, and this is publishing May 1st, 2018. And if you enjoyed the show, I would love it if you'd leave a rating in iTunes. Let's raise the glass ceiling on what it's like to age and what's possible after this point. And then share this with a friend to surround yourself with a supportive community of women on the same journey. What are you waiting for? Start flipping 50 today.